As the 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour in Durban wraps up, the University of KZN will host a series of webinars focusing on the sexual exploitation of children. The International Labour Organization recognizes sexual exploitation of children as the worst form of child labour, but there seems to be little focus on the issue. Joining me now is University of KwaZulu-Natal lecturer Rowena to discuss the topic. Rowena, good morning. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, there seems to be little known or certainly little focus on this issue. Can you tell us why?
Well, there are dire consequences with regards to the sexual exploitation of children. And as you correctly pointed out, the sexual exploitation of child labour is recognized as a worse form of child labour according to the international labour law. There has been discussions, but the discussions around the issues have been very limited. And for that reason, these webinars were designed around the conference that's occurring to bring to the front and include this particular issue on the international agenda. You know, the thing is that with sexual exploitation of child labor, it comes through with so many different associations and consequences and impacts so catastrophically on the children. So, you know, we've got to be able to now increase it. So it's not like there's no recognition. There is recognition. It's just that the drive and the international agenda needs to be expanded on to ensure effective implementation and better focus on the exploitation of our children.
Well, numbers always do a huge amount in painting the picture of the actual situation on the ground. Just how bad is sexual exploitation in South Africa?
In South Africa, we are very fortunate. Firstly, you know, I need to emphasize the fact that, you know, there's so many international and regional instruments that regulate this particular issue. And we have a very adequate legal framework with, you know, stemming from our constitution to our children's rights and the Trafficking in Persons Act and the Sexual Offences Act. The problem arises in South Africa, as in many international countries and regional countries, is the implementation of these, the legal framework. You know, it's not just about once the trafficker is or the exploiter is caught that, you know, the matter ends there. It's the whole process before that. It's the causes that lead to the exploitation or the sexual exploitation of children, stemming down to the enforcement by our law enforcement agencies, work by NGOs and FBOs, which all impact on the problem in South Africa. And in South Africa, we have issues of inequality. We have poor education systems. We have infrastructural issues in schools. We have poverty, high unemployment rates, all of which makes the sexual exploitation of children through child trafficking, through pornography usage, through even prostitution, very, very much a problem. At the moment, I cannot give you any stats offhand, but we have a very high rate of exploitation in the form of sex with children in South Africa. Yeah.
Now, when we talk about children, I'd like to imagine that it's children up to the age of 15 in my assessment. Is that correct? And if so, which age range in this group is most vulnerable and why?
Okay. So when we refer to a child in terms of our law, a child is anyone who is 18 years and younger. So the exploitation of these children will range up to the age of 18. When we deal with trafficking, trafficking can also extend not just to children, but also to adults as well. So we must bear that in mind. In Africa, sub-Saharan Africa itself, we have the highest rate of children engaged globally, and specifically in child labor on a general level. So children in the age category of 9 to 11 actually have the highest rates of employment. And if you look at the statistics on a global level, the converse is occurring in other regions. And the problem that we have in Africa is all of the socioeconomic challenges, the high levels of poverty, unemployment, also our cultural and religious beliefs that children should be engaging in forms of work. So on a global level, we are very high. And specifically with regards to sexual exploitation, we have very high levels of exploitation because many of the African countries are what we call transit countries, where children are moved across borders illegally. Yeah.
Now, there are a number of webinars that are taking place over the next short while. Talk to us about these webinars, who is invited, who is involved, and what are the objectives?
Okay, great. So, in order to feed into the ILO conference that's currently being held here in Durban, this was a side event because of the fact that if you look at the program and the agenda at the conference at the moment, there isn't much discussion on sexual exploitation of children. And so this side event was designed specifically to feed into that, to encourage partners at both a South African level as well as an international level, and to facilitate this discussion because it's such a controversial issue. So the webinar that was held by the University, the School of Law at the University of KwaZulu-Natal with the Navi Pillay Research Interest Group was held in partnership with the Teradus Homes in Netherlands, which form parts of 8 organizations in Europe. So the first seminar was held at this morning, and it focused primarily on delivering of information on child labor, sexual exploitation of children in South Africa, the Philippines, in India, as well as Kenya. In addition to this, the webinar actually invited youth advocates who actually experienced sexual exploitation as children. So there was a whole question and answer sessions that occurred in which we put forward relevant questions to them. So the webinar was very exciting. There were a lot of interested parties from globally as well as nationally. The next webinar is going to follow, and at the moment we don't have details, but we were looking at more a South African perspective, inviting the Department of Justice as well as the National Prosecuting Authority from South Africa, as well as our 3 other countries with regards to this particular issue. So the way forward from this webinar that was held is we've put together a resolution which is meant to hear the voices of our children in this critical matter, because sadly enough, we do not hear from our children, so we don't know how this impacts on their lives. And we also want to be able to facilitate more engagement, more discussion with relevant stakeholders so that we can make the difference in the lives of these children, because the consequences where children are separated from their families under false pretenses. They're exposed to horrendous conditions of working where their rights to dignity and health and safety are violated, where they're denied the opportunity to attend school, so they cannot improve their lives. So we want to be able to make a difference. We want more recognition around the issue, and we want more involvement and commitment from not just government, but all our stakeholders. So it was very interesting and very enlightening today. Yeah.
Well, Rowena, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And Rowena Bernard was speaking to us on the sexual exploitation of children and how that is one of the worst forms of child labour.